This is Stand Up for the Truth, addressing important issues and topics affecting Christians across the nation.
Crash Connell, it is Thursday, April 25, last Thursday in 2024 in April. And we welcome our online listeners at q90fm.com/listen. And on the morning show, Mary Danielsen, we like to promote the Prophecy Conference. And I went to the website. A lot of good speakers going to be there. I understand you're even going to do a session.
Mm-hmm.
And but it said no more sales available. So is it sold out? What's going on? All right.
No, what we do, and we have to do this for every conference, is on Tuesday evening before the conference, we shut down the online registration to enable the administration and the office to put together the sheets of those who are indeed
Attending,
registered.
right.
But we can always get you in at the doors. If you want to come, just show up. Registration starts Friday at 10 a.m. You can register Saturday in case Friday doesn't work for you, and you can just pay at the door. So, yeah, come on down.
It's going to be a very important, I don't remember the theme of the Prophecy Conference.
Watching and waiting.
Okay, and the talk in the building is it's going to be the most important prophecy conference ever. Mm-hmm. It's at ccappleton.org.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are at a watershed moment on planet Earth. So yes, and I have headlines today. It's sort of all-you-can-eat headlines day here on Stand Up for the Truth. And I'm going to open with my scripture. It's just a short one, but I need to hear it. So there you go. Psalm 27, 13 and 14. I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. He says it twice, so we need to do it. Let's pray. Oh, Lord, it is difficult not to lose heart on some days, many days. Help us to set our minds on you moment by moment so we can continue to hold fast to your promises by your grace. Help us to live by faith and not to rely on the things that we see with our eyes. Help us to diligently take our thoughts captive in obedience to your word. Thank you for your promise to strengthen our hearts if we only wait on you. We ask that you walk among us today and every day. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to pick up where we started here about the Prophecy Conference. It takes place tomorrow through Sunday at Calvary Chapel. Chris Quintana is Sunday morning at 9:30. And yes, you can register at the door. So if it says that online registration is closed, that doesn't mean it's full. And you can watch streaming too. So you can attend. And I think it is going to be a very important conference and a lot of information and encouragement, because I do believe for those that are still standing, you need encouragement. Something about these times tells me that's true. Go to ccappleton.org, select the Prophecy Conference page. You're going to find all you need to know. And I hope to see you in Appleton, just down the road a piece for that. Various subjects today and some dot connecting, which is my favorite thing. You probably have figured that out by now. Let's just start out with a couple of shorter topics here. The foreign aid package, Speaker Johnson, a very divisive issue. Excuse me, and that is understandable. Now, some see Johnson and his Christianity as the best thing that could happen to Congress, but we all need to remember that as a politician primarily, you usually can't rise to that spot without some controversy and possibly compromise in the political landscape that we find ourselves. So putting any hope in politics is a buyer beware kind of situation today. The headline is, House approves long-stalled Ukraine aid over angry GOP objections. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The House passed a $95 billion foreign aid package Saturday that included long-stalled funding and weapons for Ukraine after House Speaker Mike Johnson put his political career on the line to push the measure past intense Republican opposition. Lawmakers approved separate measures for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, and another bill that would force the sale of TikTok by its Chinese-controlled owner. The vote on Ukraine, the most contentious of the four, passed 311 to 112 with all Democrats in support and more than half of Republicans opposed, with one GOP lawmaker voting present. The vote marked a pivotal win for Ukraine and a defining moment for Johnson. Johnson had spoken in increasingly urgent terms about Ukraine and confronting America's global adversaries, but delayed any decision for months due to Republicans' narrow majority and his own precarious hold on the Speaker's gavel. We definitely want to note that. In finally putting his measure on the floor, he brushed aside objections from GOP colleagues who demanded border security provisions and instead turned to Democrats for critical votes to advance and then pass the measure. Johnson said in subdued remarks after the vote, "The world is destabilized and it's a tinderbox," pointing to threats from Russia, China, and Iran. And of course, typical government, throw money at it and somehow it won't be so destabilized and such a tinderbox. And we all know that that is not true. The measure also contains $26 billion for Israel, direct aid, as well as money for replenishing U.S. stockpiles and supporting U.S. operations in the region, $8 billion for Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific, humanitarian aid for Gaza. Critics say the backers of the bill were prioritizing a foreign nation's need over domestic demands. And I'm not going to argue with that, except the Israel aid. One representative, Robert Good of Virginia, a Republican, says we should have negotiated a smaller, lethal-only Ukraine bill that was paid for and had a border security provision in it and forced the Senate to join us in securing the border. Then Jeff Childers' comment on it with Coffee and COVID. He says, the New York Post ran a story yesterday headlined, Marjorie Taylor Greene lashes out after Ukraine aid bill passes, demands Speaker Mike Johnson's resignation. A complete betrayal, she says. This weekend, Speaker, and this is Jeff talking, this weekend, Speaker Mike Johnson delivered a masterclass on how to burn a budding political career to the ground in only 72 hours. The word rage barely describes how the Republican base feels about Johnson's U-turn on Ukraine aid, which was approved on Saturday in the House with 100% Democratic support and will be approved tomorrow in the Democrat-controlled Senate. Then it will be signed into law by a very lifelike, rubber-coated Joe Biden animatronic robot with the extra mumbling package. That's classic Jeff. Yesterday, irate Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene vowed on Fox News Sunday that Mike Johnson's speakership is over. Jeff says she's correct. Absent a miracle, sooner or later, Johnson is finished. Democrats might help Johnson cling to the speakership for a while, pursuant to some hideous backroom political scheme, which will only make him look even more corrupt, but the Johnson clock is ticking. So I guess that's just something to keep an eye on. Speaking of spending, two articles here. The WHO and media drum up fear of bird flu spreading to humans and bird flu vaccines ready for mass production. The spending bill in March, there was a stopgap measure. You might remember that budget in March. $1 billion was allocated to fight the bird flu. So let's just read a couple of segments on this. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone, but this is the latest. This is from Children's Health Defense, the Defender. The WHO's chief scientist, Jeremy Farrar, warned bird flu has an extremely high mortality rate for humans and could mutate to pass between humans despite no record of human-to-human transmission of H5N1. And it says the World Health Organization, WHO, again sounded the alarm about bird flu last week, warning it has an extremely high mortality rate among humans. The disease, H5N1 avian influenza virus, also known as highly pathogenic avian flu or bird flu, can pass among some animals, according to the CDC. However, it has never passed from human to human. Not that that would stop any of our noble scientists. And there have been extremely rare reports of animal-to-human transmission. Still, WHO chief scientist Farrar said there is great concern that the disease will evolve and develop the ability to go from human to human. Reports of bird flu outbreaks date back to the 1880s, according to the CDC. Since 2014, there have been periodic and increasingly alarmist media stories about the virus. Earlier this month, reports began circulating that bird flu was detected in wild birds, poultry, and a variety of mammals. The New York Times reiterated his warnings that it's mutating and could possibly pass between people. Okay, that's the windup, all right? Here's the pitch. We have to watch, more than watch. We have to make sure that if H5N1 did come across to humans with human-to-human transmission, that we were in a position to immediately respond with access equitably to vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. Of course. Since Farrar's comments, getting more wound up. Okay, another wind up here. Okay. The Biden White House on Tuesday, now this would be last week, announced a new 50-country partnership to combat future pandemics and a new pandemic fund, financed so far by 27 contributors, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Biden White House, the administration released a 64-page document detailing the program, which it said aims to strengthen the global health security and prevent, detect, and effectively respond to biological threats wherever they emerge. We know exactly what that means, Iverson said. They're going to be hunting down disease X, which is what the WEF called it during their Davos meeting, and we've got to be prepared because it's going to get us all. The Biden admin said it already supports 50 countries and has committed to 50 more, primarily in Africa and Asia, to develop better testing and surveillance and communication. She says, "You thought the Pandemic Health Treaty, which gives away our sovereignty, was scary?" she asked, which is up for a vote by member states next month. Well, this is almost as bad. Several U.S. government agencies, including U.S. Agency for International Development, the DOD, the CDC, will implement the program. So I guess this is a whole new layer of, in case the international one doesn't work and the U.S. somehow doesn't sign on or something falls apart, maybe this is just plan B. I don't know. Even if it's not, it's a bit of a mess. But I want to draw your attention to the fact that the Bill Gates Foundation is part of this. We're going to talk about these foundations because I'm going somewhere with this. Charitable foundations and why we should sit up and take notice of their shocking amount of power. And I don't just mean in this country. Now, the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisor, because we've all heard of the Bill Gates Foundation. This is another philanthropic organization descended from a long line of historical foundations that have become nothing more than progressive agents of social change. This one is a funder of decidedly left-wing, culture-killing causes like abortion, racial equality, gender-affirming care, and what they call climate justice. All are hot-button, classic progressive ideologies that are changing our world. Just think where we are. Okay, I'm going to tell you how we got there. Now, I've received emails about asking about two different programs or curriculum, if you will, creeping into the churches, and not just for small groups or midweek, but intended for Sunday morning pulpit programming. One, called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, or EHS, I'm going to take on with Chris Quintana tomorrow. I don't know if it's just pulpit programming. This is pulpit pre-programming. The other question I received is about a soon-to-be-released church program called The After Party, and the book that just came out. The logo on the cover of the book is a donkey and an elephant extending an olive branch to each other. The creators say the reason it's called After Party isn't an allusion to what might happen in some kumbaya-tic, idealistic world after we all come together once the two parties finally become one, which they have anyway. It's based on what happens after, get this, awards programs go off the air. An after party is put on for the winners who will come together and let their hair down and actually be themselves. Never mind that that's when the drugs and the alcohol start to flow. You can't make this stuff up. But the premise behind it, the after party, the reason for its creation is supposedly that politics have come roaring into churches and it's causing division among attendees around the country. Brother against brother, pastors being let go, churches splitting, distrust replacing true koinonia fellowship. Now, if that's true, first of all, this should not be. And I place a lot of the blame at the feet of social media and the leftist mass media that more than suggests that we should all be thinking about politics around the clock and that it should affect or even, create our worldview to the point that it takes a backseat to the Christian worldview, however you may define that even in these last days. Now, only a generation ago, politics was not what people lived and breathed, but even the definition of that word has changed. Well, the Bible has something to say about politics, of course. I'll draw your attention to Philippians 3:20, which says that our citizenship is in heaven. That word citizenship is from a Greek word for politics, and it goes on to say, and from there we eagerly await a Savior. Wow, perfectly positioned is that last part. We don't look to this world for a Savior, period. This verse is a biblical worldview when it comes to politics. It doesn't have anything to do with voting, which is not a moral issue. It is a conscience issue. But rather it has everything to do with how we should view our sojourn on earth as strangers and aliens. The church body, we are the aliens. You and I, we are the aliens. And we are on a diplomatic mission to the unsaved. But the church has changed in the last few years, quite radically. Now, last week on the Headline Podcast, on Tuesday, I mentioned an article called "The Churches Are Sleeping. When Did Woke Pulpits Become the Norm?" by David Bowen, in which he laments that once the average churchgoer woke up after COVID, they were woke indeed. I find that term so interesting because we are supposed to be awake to the times, but woke, how ironic that is describes this world system and the spirit of Antichrist. But the church woke up from COVID not interested in prophecy, absolutes, or Israel, but more interested in equality, diversity, inclusion, social justice, being real careful not to offend anyone. COVID really did bring in significant changes to everything, and I did not see that coming. But effectively, this means that more and more churches have been infected by the red letter approach to reforming the culture and leaving off teaching about the kingdom to come and glorifying God in a judgment-ready, sin-soaked world that saves no one and nothing. Subsequently, according to church culture watchers, division is rampant. Trump, masks, vaccines, social justice, stolen elections. And we have to admit, people have some tight-fisted views on all these things and more in the church and out of the church. Denominations now, those arose over differences, of course. Disagreements about spiritual gifts, predestination, literal interpretations of prophecy. This is not that. In any given church, there will be diverse opinions politically. I mean, that's a given, and on all kinds of things. In a church of 500 people, or 300 people, or 100 people that are all listening to a person speak about the Bible and expound on the Scriptures on a Sunday morning, you have 100, 300, or 500 different ways to process what that person is saying. No two people are going to hear anything the same. That's how it is, and it's inevitable. But the cross, now that's what we gather around, not presidential candidates who can't save the culture, and they can't even save themselves. So in light of what many see as rifts that cannot be healed, there are three men who have come up with a Bible curriculum, use that term loosely, that is intended to help Christians, quote, reframe their political identity. They are Russell Moore, editor-in-chief of Christianity Today, which I lovingly refer to as Christianity Astray, and former president of the Southern Baptist Convention during the recent season of multiple charges of sexual abuse at the hands of the Southern Baptist Executive Committee. Number two, Curtis Chang, professor at Duke Divinity School and senior fellow at Fuller Theological Seminary. His website is Redeeming Babel, and he has made it his mission to convince Christians to take the COVID vaccine, and he has stated there is no biblical reason whatsoever to provide exemption letters. The third is Wise Man. This is what they were called at the intro party to this curriculum. David French, he's the third. New York Times opinion columnist who writes about religion, law, and culture. And what's their politics, you might ask? Traditionally and always left-leaning, as is Christianity Today, and it always has been. Way before I started reading it, or dipping my toes in it in the 80s. And to fund their project, this program that churches are supposed to rally around, they have turned to the secular left-wing Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisor to the tune of $10 million. And you can't tell me it takes that much to infiltrate churches with progressive theology. But nevertheless, Curtis Chang's organization that I mentioned, Redeeming Babel, which was founded in 2019, is truly behind this after party. A bit of his bio should clarify any questions about his ideology. Curtis Chang bridges the worlds of secular institutions and theology. In the former world, he's the founder and CEO of Consulting Within Reach, a firm serving nonprofits and government agencies. His consulting work has won an award in social innovation from the Obama White House, and he teaches strategic planning as a faculty member of American University's School of International Service. Also, it says in 2021, Redeeming Babel founded and spearheaded Christians and the vaccine, the leading national effort to persuade vaccine-hesitant evangelicals. Our efforts address the anxiety felt by millions stemming from a distrust in institutions and countered the toxic politicization of a public health solution, end quote. Talk about clueless and tone-deaf. Now, tellingly, the Rockefeller Advisory Foundation has announced that this Bible study would launch in the battleground state of Ohio. It just gets weirder here. Another partner of After Party is One America, who themselves have received funds from more powerful progressive organizations such as the social justice force called the Tides Foundation, which also itself receives millions from George Soros. Oh, now we get to the heart of the matter. One America is funded primarily by organizations who funded Planned Parenthood, LGBTQ issues, and other progressive priorities. So what about any of this should make us think that the After Party is interested in helping churches heal any political rifts that might exist when they themselves advance causes that the average true Christian has no stomach for? I haven't seen the curriculum. It's brand new. I watched several reports on it and podcasts. But it is very naive to think that this Bible study in any way intends to strengthen any commitment a church might have to actually speak out against abortion, alternative lifestyles, gender surrender, or any one of a number of issues that the Bible already condemns. And if the Bible condemns it, we are to speak truth about it. Oh, I don't know, like taking the innocent human life? Yeah, that'd be one. Rather, I believe that the After Party exists to sway Christians to a progressive political will, and to call it to a Bible study is deceptive at the very least. I say it's designed to press that mute button on conservatives and non-political believers alike. Part of me now, of course, believes that the average pastor is not going to allow such nonsense to take up pulpit time or even small group time. But really, I have no idea to what extent the churches might be pulled into this for merely pragmatic reasons during an election year, thinking it might be the thing that brings their congregation together. Newsflash, it will not. And that's not his job. The pastor's job is to teach the whole counsel of the word and be faithful to the truth, not worry about how it makes anyone feel, to model a true Christian worldview and expose the lies of the enemy in the church and the culture, and to point people to the kingdom to come. And God bless all those pastors out there who still do that and have always done that and have not been swayed from their calling. And the pastors need to let God take care of the hearts of the people. Don't be distracted by this stuff. In the times we're living in, it's a massive distraction. So this train of thought, and I'm going to get started here before the break, and then I'm going to continue on about this. This is fascinating. This train of thought brought me to a short podcast from Alex Newman entitled How Deep Staters Use Tax-Exempt Foundations to Destroy Us. The Rockefeller Foundation is only one. There are many. According to Alex, the number one thing to remember is that the deep state needs money to advance their globalist agenda and to enslave the planet. Lots of money. I don't know about future worlds as depicted in science fiction where there is no money. Yeah, whatever. Good luck with that. The deep staters need lots of money. Now let's look at David Rockefeller. He passed away in 2017 at 101 years old. Just this guy alone, okay? He was the former CEO of Chase Manhattan Bank, the head of the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, founder of the Trilateral Commission, a globalist, I would call him, one of the main architects of the New World Order in the last 100 years, as it is and continues to unfold in our lives. And he admits to all of it, and he's proud of it, according to the memoir that he wrote, released in 2002. He and his philanthropy have thrown money at the Clinton Foundation, digital IDs, the coming cashless society, COVID tyranny, propping up China and its international place in the world. He loved China. The destruction of the education system going back to John D. Rockefeller, his dad, and his partnership with John Dewey. So John D. and John Dewey had a partnership to destroy education. He has thrown money at early and Nazi eugenics programs. The Rockefellers have been the power behind the throne for many decades. They even donated the land that the UN sits on. Wow. To say that they have blood on their hands is a wild understatement. They are world changers. They have been world changers. They are kingmakers. And what they do, simply stated according to Alex Newman, is oligarchical collectivism. What is that? An oligarchy is a small group of people, usually obscenely wealthy, that has control of a country or an organization. So this is a small, privileged group that holds most or all political power. Russia is said to be an oligarchy, that the rich old guys run Russia, and Putin is beholden to them. That's something worth looking up. And we are looking all of that square in the eye. And so when we talk about the Rockefellers and their dirty dealings, all the way through the last century and into this one, they're number one, to me, their foundation. And remember, this foundation is funding the after party. Okay. We're also going to look at Bill Gates, one of the richest men on earth, and the amount of money he controls, $184 billion. And he just gives it all away. Well, then how come he is getting richer? We're going to continue to talk about these foundations. When we come back, we have to take a 2-minute break. And we'll be back with more. This is Mary Danielsen. It's Headline Day on Stand Up for the Truth.
Q90 FM presents the Police Lights of Christmas, helping over 70 police departments across Wisconsin.
Each department is going to leave this night with a box full of thousands of dollars worth of gift cards.
Visit lightsofchristmas.us. Police Lights of Christmas, a ministry of Q90 FM. Join the Q staff live in studio during our semi-annual Q Drive, right here on the Q90 FM radio YouTube channel. Q Drive is when we stop our regular programming to raise money to continue spreading the gospel to people around the globe. Fun interviews, fellowship, and a deep dive into the gospel is all on tap for Q Drive Live. You can donate via Super Chat to get involved in the conversation, or go to q90fm.com/pledge.
Feedback, questions, and topic suggestions are always appreciated. Email us at comments@standupforthetruth.com.
Welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth for Thursday. It's April the 25th, and we are talking today about a variety of subjects, but one in particular, a leftist progressive Bible curriculum that is being released shortly and going to be sold to pulpits to have them tell their congregants how to think about politics in these last days. And we're talking about those who fund and put their money, a lot of it very old money, behind these things, very secular. And I mentioned a podcast by Alex Newman entitled How Deep Staters Use Tax-Exempt Foundations to Destroy Us. And this Rockefeller philanthropic organization that is backing the after party. And there are so many of these foundations out there. And this is how the globalists finance the destruction of our country and our world. And where we left off here, we talked about an oligarchical collectivism. That's from Alex Newman. And an oligarchy is a small group of people, usually very, very wealthy, that have control over a country or an organization, a privileged group that holds most or all of the political power. And Russia is said to be an oligarchy. We're not going to talk about Russia today. But we are going to go on here to Bill Gates, and he has in his control $184 billion, and it surpasses the gross domestic product of pretty much every poor nation in which he works today. He gives millions to CNN, the BBC, to climate change causes, and he's the largest private owner of farmland in the U.S., and people wonder why he keeps getting richer when he seems to be giving everything away. But I'm going to suggest that it's not selfless motives. It's very selfish motives to do what he does because there is an agenda. They're not interested, he and others like him, in empowering the impoverished. But they want to impose progressive globalist solutions. He's unelected. He isn't even a lobbyist. But he inserts money into any situation he wants changed, mostly to change how the world feeds and clothes the poor and how they get vaccinated, not if they get vaccinated. Now, his father, Bill Gates Sr., was a philanthropist and global citizen as well. He himself served on the board of Planned Parenthood in its early days, and Bill and Melinda continued to throw millions at family planning, as Margaret Sanger would have defined it. She would have been proud. They've thrown millions at Monsanto for GMO proliferation, and we wonder why our food supply is such a disaster. Bill is the second largest contributor to the World Health Organization. So, of course, he has an inordinate amount of influence there. And to suggest he comes from a eugenics ideological background is not a stretch by any means. It's in his family line. Then we have the Ford Foundation, one of the 5 wealthiest foundations in America, built on the back of staunch capitalist Henry Ford. Yet he himself was an eccentric, raging anti-Semite. The Carnegie Foundation, their stated commitment is transformational change in education, and a host of other newer ones, all intertwined and all interested in undermining the sovereignty of our nation. So, follow the money, not the politicians. The left-wing causes they espouse are lurching us all to the left and reflect their Marxist views, long-held Marxist views, and these foundations are destroying our foundations. So why do people who call themselves Christians and who have been in the Christian conversation for many, many years, why are they taking this money? Speaking of destruction, you've all heard of the Federal Reserve. The origins of the Federal Reserve are as shady as anything that's ever been undertaken in the U.S., and that is no secret. According to a website called JekyllIsland.com, the Federal Reserve was birthed at this small island off the coast of Georgia in 1910. And I have met very few Americans who've ever heard this story, which kind of surprises me a little bit if I mention that geographical area and the Federal Reserve in the same breath. They look at me quizzically. This is from JekyllIsland.com. Just before Thanksgiving in 1910, U.S. Senator Nelson Aldrich of Rhode Island, and may I add, he a very influential and wealthy U.S. Senator, he invited 6 members of America's banking elite to a covert retreat on Jekyll Island. This was before the first transcontinental call ever existed, which was placed by the president of AT&T from a phone on Jekyll in 1915. It was before the internet and cable news. Secrets could be taken to the island, and secrets would stay there. What's said on Jekyll stays on Jekyll. Wishing to avoid public scrutiny and pesky reporters, this group, dubbed the First Name Club, because no one used last names during the railroad trip down from New York to Jekyll, agreed on the cover of a gentleman's duck hunt. So that was what they told people they were going to do. One attendee even toted a borrowed shotgun. Instead, they holed up for 9 days at the Jekyll Island Clubhouse to discuss how to prevent another bank panic like the panic of 1907, when a run on banks nearly collapsed the U.S. economy. J.P. Morgan, a Jekyll Club member, personally bailed out the banks, New York City, and the New York Stock Exchange. It goes on to say, out of those clandestine meetings emerged a draft of a legislation that would form the Federal Reserve banking system, the country's central bank network, and a financial safety net that remains in place today. It was absolutely an epoch-making event, says Jekyll Island Museum's Andrea Marroquin. The reward for their labors? A robust Thanksgiving feast and a day off for that duck hunt. Now, this group of wealthy men traveled to Jekyll every year from around 1890 to the Second World War under the guise of being hunters and fishermen, which, if you've been there, it is a fabulous, beautiful sight. We go there every year, and we're always reminded of the political aspect of it. But they stopped going in World War II because they represented so much of the country's wealth that the government was worried that if something happened to them there and they were all taken out, the economy would collapse. Here's some trivia for you. Senator Nelson Aldrich, the man from Rhode Island, his daughter married John D. Rockefeller, Jr. David Rockefeller, that embodied globalist I mentioned previously, who died in 2017 at 101, he was their son. Might as well keep the fortune and the anti-American agenda all in the family. If you can find it, there's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. It is very thick, but it is very interesting and very detailed. It's not that easy to find anymore. Maybe you can get a used one. But I want to mention some of the other, there is a massive Victorian hotel on the island called the Jekyll Island Club. It is absolutely beautiful, restored. I've stayed there. But the original members, J.P. Morgan, Joseph Pulitzer, William Vanderbilt, Marshall Field, probably sponsored all their clothing, and William Rockefeller, and more. And there's a historical area there where these men met and lived in the warm months, and it's preserved. Actually, a lot of American homes are much more exorbitant and huge, much bigger on more land than these were. Of course, these were winter cottages, but if you look at American homes today with their Wi-Fi and internet and electricity and running water and indoor plumbing, a lot of Americans probably live as wealthy as these men did in the winter months. So that's a very, very interesting observation to make. But these men have sold out our nation, and the chickens are still coming home to roost. And I know that for a lot of reasons, but here in 2024, we are looking at CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. The global currency landscape is evolving quickly. Now, I've been watching the evolution of digital currencies or cryptocurrencies since 2016. And I kind of wish I'd have kept my tiny investments in them from back then, because they have grown exponentially in value since they emerged on the world scene. They're made up simply of a mathematical series of algorithms, the sequences of which were invented by a still unknown person. No one has ever figured out his true identity. Bitcoin came out of that process. You may have heard of mining for Bitcoin, a very strange process of very powerful computers using a lot of electricity and solving algorithmic sequences to mine Bitcoin. I can't wrap my head around that. I have no idea what that means. I can only parrot what they did. But there are innumerable digital currencies out there today. I remember when I could count them on one hand. And there are so many of them. So today, after a lot of growing pains, 130 nations are exploring digital currencies of their own, and that represents 98% of the global economy. This is not some small little artsy, weird thing that people who want to, separate from the banking process and just go peer-to-peer and not have to go through a bank and not go through all the fees and all the complications of a bank. That's how this started out following the 2008 economic meltdown. That's when these cryptos began to be developed from people who just wanted to have their own money. But now, 98% of the global economy, things have changed. Now, the ledger that supports the buying and selling of crypto is called the blockchain. It's very much something the world could and I think will use to keep track of all buying and selling in the world in real time. I think it's that late that this blockchain is the global ledger. It would keep track of every single transaction going on in the world using digital currency in real time, and it cannot ever be shut down, but everything would be tracked. And blockchain has and will continue to revolutionize the global financial landscape. CBDCs have fully launched in 11 countries. It doesn't seem to matter which countries or who is ahead of the game and who is behind, really, at this point, because this is going to happen. The U.S. is quite behind this process. But what matters is, if the world wants to handle transactions collectively, what has to happen is a global CBDC. The national ones, as interesting as that is, will lead to a global one. And that's necessary across borders so that national banks, central banks, and smaller banks, actually the Fed is privately owned, you maybe did not know that, but so that they can talk to each other across this increasingly small world and handle international transactions. There's no national sovereignty with CBDCs. This is what's going to take away the currencies of individual nations. This is one of the last dominoes to fall. And if you want to send money to Israel, or if you want to send money to Australia or England or whatever, if they want to send money to you, there will have to be cross-border agreements between banks, digital agreements between banks. The global CBDC is coming. Of course, privacy concerns play into the progress of CBDCs. For those of us who don't want every transaction tracked and all the data that's collected about everything that you spend money on, then another thing that prohibits these from happening or spreading, at the moment at least, is the haves and the have-nots around the world, nations that don't have the necessary technology or internet access to develop them. And regulatory frameworks among the nations are concerns, but it's still rolling right along. There are quite a few good videos on YouTube about global CBDCs, so you can check those out. You know, and the globalists, we're not concerned about any of what I just mentioned. They're full of sunshine and unicorns and rainbows on this subject. They maintain that digital cash is faster, safer, and far superior to cash itself. The EU is shooting for a 2025 to launch the digital euro. The Federal Reserve in the U.S., thank you, Rockefellers, is looking to keep up with Europe, so they're going to have to catch up. The Bahamas, they have their own CBDC. It's called the Sand Dollar. Pretty creative. But, you know, if you already pay for anything through a mobile app or use bank apps to just transfer or deposit, you already use digital currency. The central banks, of course, have the most to gain. They will avoid the losses associated with counterfeiting and the cost of printing or minting money. And since we already know from Bible prophecy that there will be a cashless society, we are simply observing the process with CBDCs. Businesses who no longer take cash, and there are many out there, a lot of us have seen signs on their door that say no cash. They're simply ahead of the game, and we can protest it by not doing business with them, if you'd like. But it's inevitable. It's not just a matter of when. It's not just a matter of if, but when. And so, here's one more article here, depending on our time frame. One of the biggest dangers in a world that is all digital is if the banksters don't like your politics or your religion, they can shut you down and debank you with a keystroke. You are done. You will not buy or sell. This just came out. 15 state officials warn Bank of America about debanking Christians. This is from Sunday. This is by Tyler Durden of Zero Hedge. He always has some interesting articles. A group of 15 financial officials from 13 states sent a notice to Bank of America raising concerns about the institution's debanking of Christians. This notice says, "We write to express our concerns over Bank of America's troubling track record of politicized debanking. Bank of America's debanking policies and practices threaten the company's financial health, its reputation with customers, our nation's economy, and the civil liberties of everyday Americans," the officials wrote in an April 18th letter to Bank of America's CEO Brian Moynihan. "We are especially troubled by Bank of America's track record of discriminating against religious ministries. Notable examples include Memphis-based charity Indigenous Advance Ministries, the Timothy II Project, and Christian author and speaker Lance Wallnau." I don't agree with Lance's Christianity and his doctrine, but I defend his right to put his money in the bank. In April 2023, Bank of America shut down the account of Indigenous Advance Ministries, which partners with groups in the African nation of Uganda to provide care and education for orphaned and at-risk children. You'd think the liberals would like that. The bank closed accounts of a Memphis church who donated to the organization. Bank of America provided vague reasons for the closure of these accounts, claiming the organization's activities exceeded the institution's risk tolerance and that it no longer wanted to serve its business type. A lot of jargon there. Months later, after being confronted by an international media organization, the bank then claimed that it closed the accounts because the for-profit business engaged in debt collection. Neither Indigenous Advance Ministries nor the church collects debts, nor was the bank able to point to any policy prohibiting account holders from engaging in such activities, the letter said. Finally, it says, in other words, that rationale was a ruse, and even if legitimate, would only apply to one of the closed accounts. In 2020, the bank closed the account of Timothy II Project International, which trains pastors in more than 65 nations. In a letter to the group, the bank claimed the closure was due to Timothy II operating a business type we have chosen not to service. The financial institution froze the accounts of Mr. Wallnow, alleging he was suspected of money laundering. However, the bank failed to provide any evidence supporting that accusation. While the bank eventually unfroze the account, they required him to answer a series of invasive questions. This pattern of religious debanking strongly suggests that systemic drivers of religious and political bias may be at work within Bank of America. No kidding. The banks are woke. I don't think that's a secret, and this is just one instance like this. You may be familiar with Dr. Mercola. He's a health guru, one of the most popular in the country. And they closed his bank accounts. And there have been other, just because they don't like him. One objective indicator of such a problem is the bank's egregiously low score on the Viewpoint Diversity Score Business Index. How funny, they're talking about diversity and equity and the hypocrisy of it all, because it just depends on what you believe. The letter pointed out that Bank of America's vague terms of service allow them to deny services for political, religious views. For instance, the company's policy says it can refuse services to clients deemed to promote intolerance or hate. Well, that's us. This policy can be weaponized by the bank against clients who express certain views, which are protected by the First Amendment, the officials wrote. Bank of America funds and partners with anti-free speech organizations like the Human Rights Campaign and the Center for American Progress while preventing employees from giving to faith-based groups in their employee gift match program. Bank of America, being the second largest bank in the nation and a recipient of a host of government subsidies, is obligated to ensure equal access to marketplace for all Americans and not play politics. It says it's been a hot topic for recent years. A November 2022 statement signed by 60 financial professionals alleged that banks like J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Capital One, and Morgan Stanley were also engaged in religious discrimination. J.P. Morgan Chase refused to process payments for a GOP-aligned organization. In addition, they shuttered the National Committee for Religious Freedom's account without explanation, demanding that the nonprofit disclose its donors and provide a list of the candidates it intends to support. Wow. I don't know how they think they can get away with such things. And they're going to try. They're going to push that button until people stop noticing. I mean, the hate in the world. Chris Quintana is going to be here live tomorrow, and we're going to talk a little bit about the anti-Semitism. It is getting alarmingly bad at major universities. And I'm stunned by the impotence of people in charge to do anything about it. It's just mind-boggling. And so tomorrow there's an excellent article out there on that, and we're going to pick Chris's brain about that. So again, Chris Quintana tomorrow live. We're going to talk about emotionally healthy spirituality, Bible curriculum. Is it good or bad? And some headlines. Looking forward to that very much, and the start of the Prophecy Conference in Appleton tomorrow at Calvary Chapel. I hope you will make some time to be with us, a little or a lot, all or some. I'm speaking Saturday morning at 9 a.m. is my session. So, hope you can make it. Also, we will live stream. Go to Calvary Chapel Appleton's Facebook page. You can watch it live. Now to him who is able to keep you from stumbling and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. To God our Savior, who alone is wise, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forever. Amen. Have a great day.